In this session, we are going to talk about Amazon S3 or Amazon Simple Storage Service. Amazon S3 is an object storage device that offers industry-leading scalability, data availability, security, and performance. This means that the customer of all sizes, from a small company or a small startup to a big multinational company or MNC, can use S3 to store the data for any use case. It can be like data lakes, it can be websites, it can be the mobile application, the backup and restore, archiving, or the enterprise application. It can even include IoT devices and the big data analytics. S3 provides easy to use management features so that you can organize your data and configure the finely tuned access control to meet your specific business, organizational, and compliance requirements. Amazon S3 is designed for 99.999999999, which is 11 nines of durability, and it can be used to store millions of applications. And actually, S3 is used to store millions of applications for all the companies around the world. The benefits of S3 is it gives you cost-effective storage class, security, compliance, audit capabilities. You can use it with almost all the providers, and it makes it easy for you to manage the data and the access control. S3 can be used in various ways like the public access, the batch operations, access point, intelligent tiering, storage lens, object lambda, and so on. And this is also what essentially we are going to do in this lab session. So let's get started with S3. Before we go for S3, let's first understand what we are trying to achieve in this class today. So by the time when we are done with the session, we would have understood S3, we would have created our website endpoints in S3, we would have secured that using ACM or Amazon Certificate Manager, and we would have created the website using Route 53. So I would have used Route 53, CloudFront, ACM, S3, and S3 bucket endpoints to create my storage and my website on the web. Also, this website will be secured by a HTTPS or the secure part. So let's get started with S3. First thing first, we'll go and create a bucket. To open S3, you can click on services, then click on storage and S3. Alternatively, you can go on the search window and type S3, and S3 console will open up for you. Next, you will see the button to create a bucket. That's what we are going to use in this class. I'll go and create a bucket over here with a domain name of my choice. Thus, I will take a domain name. Let's call the domain name as ankit.today. Now, if you are doing this, my advice will be to go to a domain provider and buy a domain address for yourself so that you can go and practice it as it is while watching the session. So that's what we are going to do over here. I already have a domain over here, so I'm going to use this domain name, which is ankitsaxena.live. So that's what I'll also go and name my bucket as. Now, you can name the bucket as anything. It doesn't matter much. There are few rules that you have to consider, which are that the bucket name should not be in uppercase, or it should not have any special symbols apart from the DNS addressing. So whatever you see in the address bar for any website, it can contain only those characters. Apart from that, you should not give it. For our ease purpose, we generally keep the bucket name same as the website name so that it becomes easy for us to understand that which bucket is for what website or for what purpose. Like in my case, you can see I have 77 buckets. And if I name the bucket something like my bucket 30 December 1 or July 20th, 2020 or July 17, 2020, it becomes difficult for you to understand that what bucket is doing what job. So for that reason, I'll go and create a bucket and I'll name it something like this with my domain name itself. Next step, you will have to select the region. Now, AWS has already realized that I work primarily in the Mumbai region. So for that reason, it has selected my data center or my region as Mumbai. Now, you are free to choose any of the region which you want. In my case, I have chosen Mumbai. Alternatively, if you want, you can also copy the settings from any existing bucket. This basically will save you the hassle of going back and creating the complete configurations again. For our purpose right now, we will not do this because we want to complete the complete S3 how it works. So we'll just leave it as it is. However, in future, when you are working on S3, you might want to go and click on choose bucket and choose the settings from a existing bucket. Next step, you can block or unblock all the public access. Blocking all the public access means the bucket becomes a private bucket, which means the object cannot be accessed by anyone over the internet. Unblocking means that the bucket might be a public bucket. Remember, we said might because even if the bucket is a public bucket, the objects inside it will have the option to be either a public object or a private object. So unchecking it means the bucket becomes a public bucket. However, the objects will still have the option to be either public or private. So right now I am unblocking it because we have to create our website. So for that reason, done this. Bucket versioning, if you want, you can enable it. If you want, you can disable it. The concept here is that if you upload two objects by the same name, how do you want Amazon or AWS to treat it? Do you want both the versions to be the same or do you want to keep a backup? So let's say, take an example. I have a file index.html. Now, if I go and upload the same file index.html again and bucket versioning is enabled, in this case, I will have two objects by the same name, index.html, which will be the older version, and index.html, which will be the new version. So I have two options in this case. Similarly, for other objects, I can do it. Disabling it means you will only have the latest object at that time. So right now I am disabling it. Then if you want, you can go and add the tags. Like let's say I am putting the name tag this, and I can put something like, let's say, created by and my name. And then maybe I'll put the date over here. Date in DD, which is 04. Date in MM, which is 07. And let's say date in YYYY, which is 2021, so 2021. Next step, if you want, you can go and enable the encryption. Enabling the encryption means that whatever data is inside your bucket is all encrypted, which is also a way which AWS and prefers, and AWS tells you to encrypt the data. This, by the way, is also known as encryption at rest, which means that whatever objects you have inside that bucket are all encrypted with a key that you have given. Next step, I'll go and create my bucket. Now, the moment I click on create bucket, you see the slider automatically goes up, and the reason is that I have said that I want my bucket to be a public bucket. So AWS needs a check from me. I'll have to check that I acknowledge that the current settings might result in this bucket and the objects within becoming public. So AWS is just warning you that if in case you happen to do this, the bucket might become a public bucket. And that is indeed what we want. So we are pretty good with it. We'll just go acknowledge this and click on create bucket. Let's wait for the bucket to be created. As you can see, the bucket has been created. So if I click on creation date over here and I sort it, I will see my bucket actually showing up, which is this bucket on the top. Next step is to go inside the bucket and understand the attributes of this bucket. First step, if you want to upload any object inside the bucket, you can do that. For that, you just have to click on the upload button and you can either drag and drop your file, or you can simply click on add files or add folder. Now, in our case, we have to take the example of a website or a HTML page. So what I'll do is I'll go and just get a web page for myself that I will get it from this address. So I open Google, I open Andalike, that's the repository I use. I click on this one and I want the template of the personal website. So for that, I click on repositories, then personal website, and I download this zip file as it is. If in case you happen to know Git, you might want to do a clone in this scenario. So if the object is all done and it is all downloaded, let me just go and download it from here to my bucket. Now that I have all the content, I'll just go and put it inside the upload folder. And AWS should take some time and it will eventually show you that this is what the bucket content looks like. Now, because it's a HTML content, so it actually has quite some data inside it. So for that reason, I will select them and then I'll go to the permission tab. I will go and give them the public read access. The reason is this is a website and it should be accessible to everyone. Next, I click on properties and I will choose any of these classes over here, which is the storage class, the retrieval phase, this one. So in my case, I'll take the standard class, which is actually created for the frequently accessed data. So any data that you are putting inside AWS, in this case, it will have a storage class from standard, intelligent tiering, standard, one zone, glacier deep archive, and reduced redundancy. I'll choose the standard class over here. So we'll take the storage class as standard. Now, in certain scenarios, you might want to take different storage classes. For example, if the data is long-lived and it is infrequently accessed, you can take standard 1A. If it is infrequently accessed and non-critical, you can take one zone 1A. You can take glacier if in case the data is critical to you, but you know that it's not going to be required a lot. Also, if in case you need to retrieve the data retrieval can range from minutes to hours. And finally, glacier deep archive, which is the cheapest storage class, in which case again the important data. However, you know that in this case the retrieval might take few hours, which typically is between an hour to 12 hours. In that case, you can go for glacier deep archive. So in our case, we are taking a standard storage class because A, it doesn't have any retrieval fees, and B, it is for the frequently accessed data. So we'll be taking the standard class over here. And then if you want, you can go and again give our encryption key over here, but we had already given the encryption key while we were creating the bucket. So I haven't added it over there. Now, if you want, you can also go and add the tags and the metadata regarding the object. So once you click on upload, the data will start to be uploaded to this particular bucket. So let's wait over here while the data is being uploaded, and it should typically take few approximately 2 to 5 minutes for the data to get uploaded, and the status will be shown to you over here. So if you see, almost all of them is done itself. Depending on what all objects you have, it might take some time. So let's wait for the data to be uploaded. and it is showing me that these many files have already been uploaded and these many files have failed right now. So let's just wait for it to happen. So now that the data has been uploaded inside a bucket, we can see that all the files were successful. So approximately 5 MB of data has been uploaded and none of it failed. So you can either go over here and have a look at the pages to see whether all the files were successful or not. Eventually, if all the data has been uploaded, let's go and test it out. If I click on this file index.html and I open this address over here, it will actually show me my website coming up. Okay, so I see the web page coming up over here. So this is for a particular file. If you want to see that how a file is going to behave inside your bucket, you can do this. Next step will be to go to the properties tab here, and inside the properties tab there are multiple settings which have to be done. We'll talk about that. Then we'll go to the permission tabs, talk about them, then the metrics, management, and the access point. So this is what we want to do inside our S3. So let's get started. First thing, the properties tab. Now in the beginning, when we were creating the bucket, we had the option to enable the bucket versioning or to disable it. If in case you did a setting over there and at any point of time you want to go and change that, in that case you can go for bucket versioning, click on edit over here, and you can either enable it or you can suspend it, so it can be edited straight away. Next part is the tags. Now we have the tags which we had created over here. If you want to go and change the tags for any reason or add a new tag, you can do that also by clicking on the edit window over here, and you are free to either change the value, completely remove the tag, or add a tag, either of the scenarios. Next, if you want to go and change the encryption, so a typical example means if you want to change the encryption, so you were earlier using key 1 for encryption, now you want to change it to key 2. In that case, you can go for the default encryption, click on edit, and you can go and choose the key whatever you have. So if in case you have a key and you have kept it inside your KMS or key management service, you can go and choose the key from there. If in case you don't have the key, you can either go to KMS or you can just click on this button over here, create key, which will go and create the key for you. Next step, intelligent tiering archive configuration, a new thing that Amazon introduced recently. In this case, let's say I have uploaded few objects inside my bucket which are of some storage class. Now the objects have to move from one storage class to the next one. This can be done either by me. So if in case I need to go and change the storage class of an object, I can just click on that object, click on action, click on edit storage class, and I can go and change that. So in this case, I have selected one zone 1A and click on save changes. So I see that my object has indeed been changed. So to confirm that, let's click on the close button. And over here, if I go and see, you see this object is one zone 1A. The storage class has changed. Now, if you want to go and change it again, so a typical scenario is in case people are using your object more, in that case, you might want to go and change the storage class of that. So for that, click on edit storage class and then select the class over here. So let's take this standard class and save changes. So now my object again has gone and changed to this storage class, which is standard. Next step, if I go to my properties back again and I want to change the storage class, but I don't want myself to do it. Rather, I want AWS to do it for me. So a typical example is that a object which has not been used for quite some time. In that case, those object you might want to go and change it. So object which has not been used or which has rarely been used, you might want to go and bring down the storage class of that. So advantage of this is that the bill certainly goes down because all the objects need not to be in the storage class, which are the high-end storage classes like standard. In that case, you can choose a configuration by clicking on create configuration over here, and you can give a name. So let's say archive after 90. Let's write it in camel case, archive after 90 days. And then this can either be for a specific object or for all the objects. In my case, because I want all the objects to follow that, for that reason, I'll choose applies to all objects in the bucket. And I will go for archive. In this case, I will add the value as 90, which means that the object which is not being used for 90 days will automatically go up inside your archive storage class. You can also go and take the deep archive class, in which case, let's say an object which has not been used for 180 days will land up inside the deep archive access tier. So if you click this, the intelligent tiering archive configuration has created a policy so that whatever objects are there inside your bucket will automatically be archived into a specific access tier. It can be the archive access tier, it can be the deep archive access tier, depending on how much your object is being used, rather how much the object is not being used. So any object which falls into the rare category and we know that it's not going to be used that much will go inside your intelligent tiering archive configuration. So if I go back to my properties tab over here and I go to my intelligent tiering archive configuration, I do see that I have my archive configuration where I'm putting it to archive tier or deep archive tier after whatever time I want. Next, if you want, you might want to keep a log of the S3 so that it can help you in analyzing how your buckets are actually being used, utilized, under or overutilized. For that, you can go for access logging over here. Just click on edit, click on enable and give the new bucket name where you want these logs to be kept. So either you can click on browse S3, select your bucket over here, or you can just give the bucket name. So let's say if I had to give this bucket, it would have been something like S3 colon slash slash and the bucket name. That's it. Now, in ideal scenarios, you never keep the logs of the bucket in the bucket itself. So that is what AWS is also warning me, that your source bucket and the target bucket are the same. So it might make it difficult for you to understand what logs you are looking for, and it will also increase the price because the logs are kept inside the same bucket with a higher storage class. So in that case, you might want to go and put a different bucket name over there. So in my advice, you should always create one bucket first which will store all the logs, and whatever logs are there for any bucket should ideally go inside that bucket. So what you can do is you can go and create a bucket. Inside that, you can create multiple subfolders, and each subfolder logs will be the logs for that new bucket that you created. So that's a way of doing it. So in this case, server access logging, if you want, we can go and enable it. Then you might also want to go for some event notification. In this case, if at all AWS has to send a notification to you, it can be sent to you on a specific topic. So it can be based on anything. It can be a topic, either a queue or a Lambda function. In this case, you will have to go and create a SNS topic for yourself. So let's go and first create a SNS topic so that then we'll understand that how the events actually work. So for that, what I'll do is I'll go to my search window. I will type SNS over here, or simple notification service, and I will create a topic for myself. And this topic will be having my email ID. So in case if something happens, AWS will tell me about that via a notification. So for that, I click on create topic and I give my topic name. Let's call it as notification home Mumbai. Then display name can be anything. So let's call it as topic for home region of Mumbai. Next step will be to go and create the topic. Now, if the topic has been created, you will have to add the email addresses for the people or to whom this email should be sent. So for that, you can click on create subscription over here. You can select the protocol as email and you can give your email. I am choosing my email as this. And click on create subscription. Now, the moment you do this, email will actually go to the provider and they will have to confirm that whether they want to receive this email or not. So in my case, I have clicked on confirm subscription and now my subscription is confirmed for this particular queue. So it says you have successfully subscribed. Fine. Now let's go back over here. And I go to my topics. I go to my topic over here. I click on my topic name, notify home region Mumbai, and I do see a ID and an endpoint, which is actually my email address. Now, if in case something happens to my bucket or for any event that is triggered inside this bucket, AWS is going to warn me or tell me via this particular event. So let's go and create that. So let's say I want to create an event notification. Let's call it as all event for bucket and the name of the bucket. Okay, now next part, it can either be for all the delete events, all the restore event, redundancy, replication events, and so on, or you might just want to put it for certain events. So depending on your use case, whether you only want to be notified when the objects are deleted or they are created or they are modified, in that case, you can select those all checkboxes over here, and I will be forwarding it to a SNS topic, and the SNS topic I can choose it from here. So my SNS topic shows up, which is notification home Mumbai, and I click on save changes now. So this basically, if everything is good, the topic or this particular event will be created for me. And now if in case of any change happens, AWS is going to inform me via my email address. So let's go back to our properties. Next part is my transfer acceleration. So a transfer acceleration in AWS is used if in case you want the data to be sent to AWS and retrieved from AWS at a faster rate. So this speeds up the content transfer to and from S3 by typically as much from 50 to 500% for long distance of larger objects. So the customers who have either the web or the mobile application with widespread users and people, those who are away from the S3 bucket, in this case, you can experience long and variable upload and download speed over S3. So in this case, the transfer acceleration, how it is known in AWS as S3 transfer acceleration or S3TA, reduces the variability in routing, congestion, and speed that can affect the transfer and logically shortens the distance to S3 for remote application. Thus, it improves the travel or the transfer performance by routing traffic through CloudFront's network over AWS backbone infrastructure. And this is done by using the network protocol optimization. The best part about transfer acceleration is that if you have multiple people across multiple geography using your application, you don't have to do much to make the speed, access speed or the upload download speed faster. Rather, for us, we just have to go click on the transfer acceleration, click on the edit button, click on enable, save changes, and then that should be it for it. Okay, now there is one issue though, that it is saying that the transfer acceleration is not supported for buckets with periods in their name. The thing is that this dot symbol should not be there inside the bucket name if in case you want the transfer acceleration to be enabled. So in this case, you have two options. Either you can go and change the bucket name completely, or you can do a sync of this bucket from this bucket to the next bucket. That is also what we are going to discuss inside our management part. So one thing to remember for transfer acceleration is that if in case the bucket has a dot symbol or a period symbol, in that case, the transfer acceleration is not enabled. Next part is my requester pays. This is used in scenarios where I don't want to pay for the transfer in and out fees from my S3 bucket. Rather, I want the person who is trying to access my data to pay for that. In that case, I can click on enable over here. And now if someone is trying to download the data from my bucket or upload the data, in that case, that account will be paying for my S3 charges. So I don't have to pay for that. In this case, obviously the anonymous access is disabled because only anyone who has access to your S3 or AWS account can go and access this particular bucket. Finally, we have a static website hosting. This is also what we will be doing because we have hosted our website in S3. For that, I click on the edit button over here. I click on enable and I will have to specify the first page. So the first page for my website was index.html, which means that if in case anyone what tries to open my website, the first page that opens up will be index.html and the error page. Now, in ideal scenarios, it should be error.html, but because I don't have one as of now, I'm just choosing index.html in this case. If I click on save changes now, it should have created the website endpoint for me that can be seen by going to the end. And now if I try and open this domain over here, I'll see my website actually coming up. Next, you can click here, and I actually see the website content over here. So this is how we create our websites inside AWS S3 that can be done using static website hosting in S3. So till now we have talked about the objects tab and the properties tab. Next step is to talk about the permissions tab on how do you make your bucket public and private. So let's get started with that. Inside the permission tab of the bucket, like we did last, we had created the bucket as the public bucket. So for that reason, you see block all public access is set to off. However, in this scenario, if you want to make the bucket as a private bucket, you can click on edit over here. You can just check this option of block all public access and my bucket becomes a private bucket in this case. Next one, you might want to create a specific bucket policy for a bucket. So a bucket policy can be used in case you want to give some very specific conditions on the bucket. For instance, condition 1, I want the bucket only to be accessed from this particular IP. Condition 2, I want the bucket to be enabled only if MFA is active on that particular user, and so on. So if you create the bucket policies like that, you can go and add it inside the bucket policy. These policies are added at the service level itself. Next is your object ownership. In this case, if you want, you can also go and give the object ownership to someone else. Now, a case where you might use this is in scenario where instead of you want to give the ownership to someone else also. For instance, in your organization, you are keeping the logs of the bucket and you are keeping it inside a specific bucket. In that case, you might want to go and change the ownership, so you just have to go and give the ownership over here. Also, you might want to give the ownership to someone who is writing that object, or only the owner of the bucket, which in this case is you. Finally, you have the ACL or the access control list. If in case you want everyone to view all the object inside your bucket, you can go and make it list over here. So in this case, everyone will have access to read inside your bucket. Remember, the write permission is still not possible. Uh, Now, in Arden, under no scenario will you actually go and ever give write permission to anyone in this world. However, if you might want to do that, that can only be done via CLI or the API console. That is what we are going to do later in this session. So this is about the permission tab. Next, you have the metrics of your bucket. Metric is used if in case you want to see how a bucket is being used, how the objects are being used, and how many people are in general trying to get your bucket or trying to write data, read data from the bucket, and so on. So any metrics that you have inside your bucket can be seen by going inside the metric tab of your bucket. Next, we have the management. In the management, we see lifecycle rules, the replication rule, and the inventory configurations. Let's talk about them, starting with the lifecycle rule. Let's take a typical example wherein I want my data to automatically shift between multiple storage classes depending on the duration. So the data which I need to be present in front of me at that very moment, and it's important, in that case, we'll go for the standard class. However, the data which is older than, let's say, 1 year shouldn't be in standard class. It can go to either one zone 1A or just a glacier class, and maybe after 5 years it can go to glacier deep archive. So for these scenarios, if we want to automate this thing, we can take help of lifecycle rule. In short, consider your AWS lifecycle rule to be the simple rule by which you can go and transition the storage class from one storage class to the another. So in this case, you can manage your objects so that they can be stored in a cost-effective way throughout their life cycle. And this you can configure using the property of life cycle. In this case, you have two things like we see in a lifecycle rule. First is to transition the object, which means I want to change the storage class. I might also want to expire the objects. Let's say the objects which are older than 5 years should be expired. So I can take help of expiration objects also. So let's get started with the lifecycle rule. In this case, before we get started, let's take a typical example where I want my object to go from standard to standard 1A after 30 days, standard 1A to one zone 1A after 60 days, one zone 1A to glacier after 1 year, and glacier to glacier deep archive after 2 years. Also, I want my object to automatically expire after 5 years. So this is what we are going to build in this particular part. So let's get started. For that, open your bucket like you already have, click on the management console, click on create lifecycle rule, and let's go and start. So let's call this action as a archive action here. And this can be for some specific objects or it can be for all the objects. In my case, I am choosing all the objects and I acknowledge. Then I can put it for the current version also and for the previous version also. As we talked about earlier, the previous version will come in when you have the versioning enabled on your objects. So if in case the versioning is enabled and there are multiple versions of the same object, this lifecycle rule can apply to those objects also. Or in case where you might want to expire the object, the same thing you can have for the current and for the previous one. We'll come back to that in some time. Right now, let's start creating our first rule, which said that after 30 days, the objects should go to standard 1A. I just add 30 over there, and that's pretty much it. Now, if in case I want to change it to one zone 1A, I can go and put this. And let's say I want it to automatically change to one zone 1A after 60 days. Then I might want to change it to Glacier after, let's say, 1 year. So I have added 365 days over here. And finally to Glacier Deep Archive after, let's say, 730 days or 2 years. So this is how I can automatically create a rule for transitioning the current version of the object. Similarly, the version which is not in the current one or which is for the previous version. So for the previous version, if we have to apply the same rule, we can do that. 30 for standard 1A, let's say 60 for one zone 1A, Glacier after 1 year, and Glacier Deep Archive after 730 days or 2 years. So basically, again, you'll have to acknowledge that. And if you go down, you will see over here that AWS is automatically creating a image for you by which you can understand that the object is moving from 0th day to 30th day to 60th day to 365 days to 730 days, and it is going for, so from 0 to 30 it remains in standard or whatever class you have selected at that point of time. 30 to 60 in standard 1A, 60 to 90 in one zone 1A, and then 60 to 365 for one zone 1A, 365 to 730 in Glacier, and 36 after 2 years or 730 to any day in the future, it remains in Glacier Deep Archive. So if you have created this rule, it means that the object storage classes will automatically be transitioned from one storage class to the next one. Now, if you also want to expire the objects, let's say this one, I want to expire both the current version and the previous version. In this case, you will have to go and select the deletion class. So in this case, what I will do is I will create a class or a transition rule where I will say I want to delete the objects after 5 years. So 5 years basically is 1825 days, and the same thing I put for the non current version object. So the previous version and the current version. Now, please note it's not important that this number has to be same. You might want to delete the non-current version object just after a year. That depends on the configuration, whatever you are setting at that point of time. And this is pretty much it. If you go and create a rule over here, in that case, you will have to go and give this. So let's say it has to be like I gave 365 over here, but AWS says that you cannot put any number which is below 730. So for that reason, I'll just go and put 731 over here. Now, this depends on the compliance rule of AWS and the compliance rule between the geography and what the customer has created with AWS. So if this lifecycle rule has been created, you can see it shows up over here and it says that the current version will change to standard 1A, one zone 1A, Glacier, and finally Glacier Deep Archive. This is the configuration part of my bucket. Now let's go to the next part, something known as AWS S3 Replication Rule. So before we get started with that, first of all, let's understand that why will we need replication. So a typical scenario is that I have the data inside a bucket, which is inside a region. What if I'm unable to access that region for any purpose? So it can be for any way. So in this case, what we do is we might want to go and change the region from one region to another, or rather, I will have the objects kept inside two different regions so that just in case if I am unable to access the data from one region, I can still go and access it from the next region. This thing is known as replication. This can always be done manually using CLI, what we are going to do shortly also. But for now, if in case you want to go and automate the complete thing, that is also very well possible. For that, we will have to go and create something known as a replication rule. For that, you go click on create replication rule. Here you will have to go and give the name of that. So let's say copy data to next bucket, and I can choose to enable or disable the rule. So this is enabled right now. Here I'll have to go and give the bucket name. So this bucket, by the way, can also be inside a different person's account or a different account in AWS. So I'm choosing the bucket in this account. I'm clicking on browse S3 and I am saying I want to transfer the data inside, let's say, this bucket, or let's give a different one, August 13 202 bucket. I click on choose path and it says that the data inside this bucket will be migrated, or it will be transferred or replicated to my bucket in North Virginia. If you want, you can also go and replicate the object over here. If you want, you can also change the storage class. So let's say that my bucket, which was in one region, is having standard storage class. For the next one, I can choose, let's say, one zone 1A or standard, or any object class for that sake. In ideal cases, you should ideally choose Glacier or Glacier Deep Archive. The reason is that the data is still in your bucket. So you don't want to pay for standard class in region 1 and standard class in region 2. So for that sake, you can choose either Glacier or Glacier Deep Archive. You can go and enable RTC or replication time control, which means that 99.99% of the data from your bucket 1 will be replicated to bucket 2 within 15 minutes. You can also delete the marker replication, which means for that whatever the markers are created will be deleted. Finally, replicate the modification sync, which means that the metadata changes whichever you have done inside the bucket will also be replicated to the next bucket. So if you go and create a lifecycle rule like this, in this case, this replication rule will ensure that data from bucket 1 is automatically replicated to your bucket 2 and so on. Finally, let's go to our inventory configuration. This is created if in case you need to get a configuration report of all the objects which are there inside your bucket, including the metadata. For that, just click on create inventory configuration, give it a name. Let's call it as bucket hyphen report. Here you can give for the all version or for a specific version. Then you will also have to choose the bucket. So whenever this configuration is actually pushed out or you get a report, it has to be saved at some place. I can choose the bucket where I want this report to be saved. If in case I want a different bucket, I can choose that, for example, this bucket over here. And then you just have to go and tell what all parameters you want to be visible to you once the report is created. This again is a configuration thing. You can go and add the fields over here. So once the report is pushed to your account, you will also see these additional fields inside that particular report. So finally, we have a access point. A access point inside S3 is a way by which you can manage your data inside the bucket, which can be done via your network endpoints. So a endpoint actually is the policy that controls the use, how you can access Amazon S3 resources. So the endpoints comes in your S3 also, it comes in your DynamoDB also. In short, it creates it easy for you to go and access your data from inside your VPC. For that, you just have to go click on create access point, give it a name. Let's call it as access point hyphen replicate hyphen data. Then it can be inside the VPC or it can be over the internet. If it is over the internet, you can have option of blocking the access like we had done earlier. If it is inside your VPC, you will have to go and simply give your VPC ID over here. If you give your VPC ID over here, in this case, whatever data has to be replicated or the data has to be moved from inside your VPC to S3, that can be done like this. So if this is done, that's your access point inside S3. Now, uh, we had started by talking about the website that has to be created. We indeed have a bucket endpoint, which is over here. If I open this website, I do see the template on the top. However, on the top, it says that the connection to this site is not secure because this website essentially is working on HTTP. Have a look on this bucket over here. The address endpoint is HTTP. However, in real-time scenarios, we will want this to be HTTPS. So for that, I will have to go and create the certificates. Now, if I go back to my AWS page itself over here, I'll see my address over here. It gives the lock icon, the certificate where it says it is issued by Amazon. And this is telling that this website is indeed a secure website by seeing HTTPS over here. So in case if I want to go and create my website over the secure channel, or I want my website to work on HTTPS, in that case, I will have to go and first create a certificate for my website. The certificate should be similar to this certificate over here. Now, there are multiple ways to get this certificate. These certificates are known as the SSL certificates. However, AWS has made it easy for me. I can go and get the certificates myself by using a service of AWS known as ACM or Amazon Certificate Manager. So for that, let's go and type on ACM or Amazon Certificate Manager over here and click on Certificate Manager, and you will have to go and do certain entries in ACM, after which this certificate will be issued to you. So this essentially is how you can get your new SSL or TLS certificates over AWS. Before we go for ACL or my ACM over here, I'll have to go and do the corresponding entry inside my service of AWS, which is Route 53. So inside my Route 53, I'll have to go and add this particular domain inside Route 53 by going to my DNS management. Please note, just like S3, which is a global service, my Route 53 also happens to be a global service. So for that, I'll go to my DNS management, click on create hosted zone, and then I will have to give my domain name. So my domain name, I have already bought it from this provider. I'll just go and add it over there, this one, and I'll say this is the domain for and this thing. It's obviously on a public hosted zone because it's on the internet, and I click on create hosted zone. Once the hosted zone has been created for you, you get the NS server details or the name server details. These details have to go and it has to be updated inside your domain manager. So for that, navigate to your domain manager, search for name servers. Once you see them, they will ideally be the default ones. We will have to go and change them. So click on enter my name servers, this part. Remember to remove the dot in the end. Second one, I copy this and going back to my provider here, this. Then again, click on add name server, copy the third one and place it. Then again, add name server and finally the fourth one. This part here and click on save. Once it is done, you might see a pop-up or an email where you will have to verify that it is indeed you who is trying to change the name servers. So once everything is done, you should see a page where it says that the name servers aren't managed by us. So for that, let's refresh the page once and have a look. So it still says it is on the park domain. This is very well possible because whenever you change the DNS entries, it might take any time starting from now to 72 hours. It can be any of that duration. So you generally have to wait whenever you are working on the DNS part. So let's just go refresh the page once more and see. if the parameters have moved, and yes, it has. And that can be verified by clicking on name servers, and I see the name servers are over here. Apart from that, it says the records and it isn't managed by us. So the Route 53 part is done as of now. Now we will have to go and create our own certificates using ACM or Amazon Certificate Manager. For that, we go to provision certificates and we click on get started. We request for a certificate and we will have to go and give our domain. So let me go and give my domain over here, which is this. I might also want it for www.domain name, or it can also be star dot this. For example, the website might be ankesaxena.live, or maybe aws.ankesaxena.live, or maybe www.ankesaxena.live, and so on. Next, just click there and you will have option of either DNS validation or email validation. I will choose DNS validation because I have already transferred my details to Route 53. For that, click on next, click on tags. Here we can give the tag name over here. So this one, and let's say, and this. So if everything is good, next step, click on review over here, click on confirm and request. At this step, depending on whether the migration actually happened as of now or not, you might see a button create record in Route 53. You just have to go, click and create this and create. Now at this point of time, you can click on the continue button and it will take some time. So it generally takes a few minutes. It might even take hours, like I said, from 48 to 72 hours for this to actually happen. So let's go and also create the same certificate inside another region of North Virginia. Remember that the certificate that I had created earlier was in Mumbai. This one is in North Virginia. For that, again, the same steps, request a certificate, give the domain name, let's say www. and the domain name, and let's say star dot and the domain name, and click on next. DNS validation, next here. Here I'll give the name, let's say this, created by, and give the name. You can also add multiple tags like we had done earlier. Let's say created date is 04, then created is 07, and created YYYY is 2021. And review, and finally click on confirm and request. So if everything is good, again, the same thing here, you will have to just go and click on create a record in Route 53. Second one, create a record in Route 53. And the third one, create the record in Route 53. If all of them are done, click on continue. And in some time, you will see that the certificates have been issued to you. Now, again, remember that this process might take some time depending on how soon was the certificate or how soon the configuration was copied. If everything is good, you should see it as issued over here and it will show up as success. So let's just wait over here and wait for the certificates to be issued. In the meantime, I'll also go back to my region of Mumbai and see that my certificates are indeed being in the process of validation. Just to confirm that this thing all happened, you can again click there, click on create, and so on. So the certificates in North Virginia and Mumbai both should be created. So it is still pending the validation, that's fine. Now, if you want to confirm that, you can go on the top, go inside Route 53. And if you remember earlier, there were only 2 records that were created inside my Route 53 console. Let's go back and have a look at my Route 53 console, where I indeed see my hosted zone. Clicking on the hosted zone will take me to my domain. which in turn will show me the records. So if you see, there were only two records which were there earlier, NS and SOA. These two records that you see, the new one have been created with your ACM or Amazon Certificate Manager. So if you see, I'm inside North Virginia, this is underscore 5D8 EEE. If I go here, underscore 5D8 EEE, and the next one is underscore 5DE, and this one is 608 555. If I go back to my round 53, I see 608 555. So indeed, the records have been created. The certificate is taking time because I have transferred my things from one provider to the next one. So if everything is good, in some time, you should see the certificate being issued like you see over here in North Virginia. Let's go back to our region of Mumbai and see if the certificates are issued there also. You can choose any region you want. We have chosen North Virginia. So if it's not done in Mumbai, no worries. You can go create a record in Mumbai, then next time create the next record, and finally go and create the last record over here, clicking on create. And if everything is done, you can just go click on the refresh button, and it will again take some time, but eventually it will be created. Please remember, it might take around 48 to 72 hours for you to go and create the certificates or for them to be issued to you. If everything is good over here, let's go back to our North Virginia. Now that the certificates have been created, and basically we went to Mumbai and we refreshed the page, but they are still in the process of being created, and that's fine. What we'll do now is we'll go to our final service of CloudFront, and we will make our website live over HTTPS. So for that, let's go and open CloudFront, which is the global content delivery network of AWS. We click on CloudFront. And once CloudFront opens up for us, we will click on create distribution, get started. Here I will have to give the domain name. This domain name will actually be the endpoint for me. So you can remove the HTTP part and you can just copy the endpoint detail part over there. So for that, I will go domain manager. It doesn't say because it is anyhow migrated. I can very well close it, not required as of now. I just copy that and AWS will automatically understand. So over here, I'm just saying redirect HTTP to HTTPS so that whatever traffic flows inside my endpoint or my website will all be redirected to HTTPS itself. Next part, I have my own certificate over here, which if I click over here, it will show me the domain name. That is my certificate. What I will do is I will also go and put it as alternate CNAME so that if in case if anyone tries to open my domain name ankitsaxena.live, it will forward to my CloudFront distribution, which in turn will forward to my website endpoint, which in turn will forward it to my S3 buckets index.html. So next one, if you want, you can give the domain or the comment also. Let's call it as CDN for domain and click on create distribution. Now the domain name will be visible to you over here. So if someone tries to open up the domain name, this one, it will actually forward you to your address. Right now, we won't see anything because it is still being created. So let's just wait for 2 minutes, and by that time, it should be available to us, and then we will take it ahead. Now that we see my domain is enabled or deployed, in that case, let's go take the domain name again. And if we open it, I should see my website coming up with the address and it says certificate is valid. The same thing that we saw with AWS also. Now, one last thing to do is over here, if I see the domain name, it gives this particular address over here. I don't want this to go because it doesn't look good. So in this case, what I'll do is I'll go back to my Route 53 over here. I will create a record over here and I will say, if someone tries to open up this domain, please forward it to the endpoint that I have created or the CloudFront distribution endpoint, which in my case is this. So let's copy paste it here. Though AWS is automatically telling me, but it's always better to go and paste it and click on create records. This again might take few seconds in coming up, but eventually if everything is good and I try to open my domain over here, it should forward me to my domain like I see this one. And over here on the top, if I click on certificate valid, it tells that the certificate is indeed issued by AWS. So this is what we wanted to do with S3. A snapshot of what we have done is we have created S3 bucket. We have placed our content inside the bucket. We have understood about the configurations of the bucket. Then because we created a bucket, we also created a website endpoint of that bucket. And my website endpoint was being referred via my CloudFront distribution. But CloudFront distribution needs the certificates. For that, I went to ACM or Amazon Certificate Manager. And then I created a certificate using my Route 53. And eventually, if everything is good, I should see my domain over here. For example, if I type this, hit enter, I see my domain coming up. This is what we wanted to do in S3. So that's it about S3. I will see you in the next one.